Hello, I'm Dr. Ron England, and I'm going to take you through a little bit of a programming exercise. This is another JavaScript web programming video that's going to show you a designed application and how that application was executed. So the application we're looking at is one that I've wrote called the Quick Class Planner. And the reason I chose this is it allows you to demonstrate simple interface design principles and also separation of data and business rules, and then how I can use this different design elements to make these business rules actually kind of come alive. So let's look at what I can do here. This allows me to do some simple drag and drop. So classes turn green when you've had the prerequisites to take the class. So if you're taking classes, you might recognize this. On the left-hand side, I have a completed, and on the right-hand side, I have the semester plan. So as if I drag classes over to completed, you can actually see other classes turn green. So let's say in semester 1, I plan to take the calculus class, discrete analysis, which I can take. I've already taken this course, so this course is now available. And let's say we'll throw in this course here. And now what I can do is I can actually scroll down and move my way through and say, well, the next semester, let's go ahead and pick up these courses. I've already taken that course, so let's go ahead and throw this into the semester 2, and it's totaling up the hours. You can kind of see it's an interesting application. It's relatively straightforward to use. Simplicity of design is extremely important for the acceptance of designs. So all this design does is have you dragging left for completed and dragging right to plan to take. And I've only put in 3 semesters here. And if you look, there's a huge list of courses that you would have to take. Now, suppose you're further along, well, you just drag more over into the completed side. And it auto-checks for prerequisites, and it auto-checks to see if you can actually take a course in a particular given semester. So let's go outwards a little bit, and let's actually look and see how this was executed. So I'm going to jump over here to JS and I'm not really interested so much in the interface as I'm interested in how I did this. If we look at the HTML segments, really all you're going to see is a table with 3 columns. I typically do prefer to use tables for design applications like this rather than using style sheets, just because the simplicity of knowing exactly how it's going to lay out on most screens. And then each of the individual classes that you see and the drop spaces are all simply just div. They're div tags. So if I were to go in here and look at them, I would see, let's say, a div tag. That would be someplace where I might drop something. I have a div here called completed. The class completed just gives its visual elements. I liked it having these rounded borders with a black border around it and different color schemes. That's pretty much all up to you as a designer to come up with the way that you want that to look. The green-yellow scheme to me worked very well, because green being, okay, it's okay to take this class, but you can also drag it over to use it for planning. So how does this work? Well, first off, what tools did I use? This is written in JS Fiddle right here, but it's going to be able to work on any web page. I just use JS Fiddle for a lot of my programming. And the 2 tools that I used inside of JS Fiddle was I am using the jQuery library. So the jQuery library is one of them. And in external resources, I am using jQueryUI. And in JS Fiddle, you actually have to put them in here. But essentially, if you were going to put this on a web page, you would simply put references to the CDN for jQuery and jQueryUI, or you would actually put those onto your website and then just have references to them from your code. So when the document is ready, if you should have some familiarity with jQuery, or you're not going to be able to follow this lecture or this presentation at all. But when the document is ready, it's going to really call 2 functions, create list all and set drop targets. We're going to have to look at that. So essentially, once the document is ready to go, I'm going to call these 2 functions, create list all. That's going to create the list of classes that you saw in the middle of the screen. And set drop targets is simply going to say, I've got these places that I want to be able to drag these things to. I want to have that set. Now, I said a little bit about separation of data and the actual business logic. The data is data, and the business logic is executed in code. So the JavaScript code controls the business logic, and the data is the data. So what I did for this is I simply made a global variable called course list, which is an array. And it's an array of JSON objects. And the JSON objects themselves, you can see here, I've created course, it's the name of the course, a name, which is the actual understandable name of the course. So the course in this case is Mac 1105, which corresponds with college algebra. I created this PR Met. I actually didn't use that in my final design when I actually coded it, but I put it in here because I thought that I might need to be able to keep a flag of whether the prerequisites of the course were met or not. But in the end, I never did have to use this. I did create another one called taken, whether the course is actually, the person has taken the course, which I did use. And those were essentially all start off with the value of false. And then because I wanted to count the number of hours in each given semester and the total number of hours of courses taken, I created another JSON data object called hours, and I set those to be the actual hours. So if you were to look at this, you would see that this is simply course list is an array of these objects. And I guess I could call them course objects. So I have course list, which is a global array. I did not need to make this global. I did it for a little bit of simplicity, and it could easily be made into something different. That would be not a global object, but I would be passing it to the individual functions. Okay, because the application really only deals with this one thing, this is not really a bad violation of the use of global properties. I also kind of violated a few other ones here. I did create these, I created an array of arrays to keep track of individual semesters. So, and then I created another array called semester hours, which kept track of the number of hours for any individual semester. And my business logic was that semester 0 is taken. Semester 1, 2, and 3 are the only three that I actually use in the application, but I built it so that I would have 4 and 5. Now, I could have also easily just created semesters as an array of individual of arrays, so I could put arrays inside of here. I didn't do that for one simple reason, is I wanted to actually keep track of the semesters themselves by being able to pass an individual variable that was that semester. So if you look at this, I've got semester 0 through semester 5, which actually are arrays, and they are inside of another array called semesters. Okay, obviously there's a lot of different ways to do this. This is the way I chose to do it. Now, create list all is where there's actually a lot of action going on. So create list all was the one that made this list of these classes that were right there in that center of the table, the ones that were draggable. And this is not necessarily difficult to do. I have a logic function, which is business logic, says if prerequisites met I. Well, I is going to be the index of the actual course in that course list, because remember, the course list is an array, and I would be the index of the elements in that array. And if the prerequisites are met, I'm going to make this thing draggable. So I essentially create, I've got this div, I've got a class so that it looks pretty, I stick it into the table, and because I have a div in the table where I can actually drop it, see I use all.append a, and I also make this draggable by setting the draggable property, which is part of jQueryUI. And if it's not, I make it yellow, and it's not draggable. Okay, well that's pretty straightforward. I create a div, I stick it into the table. If it's draggable, I set it to be draggable. If it's not, I don't set anything at all, and I append that. Now, I do one thing that's interesting here is I create the actual ID of each individual element is also going to correspond with the index in the array in course list. So if you go up here to course list and you look at these are going to be indexed from 0 through the number of courses minus 1. And I come down here and I look at how I actually define the ID of each of the divs that corresponds with that course. It has the ID, which is that same index. That simplifies my ability to know what object I'm working with. Next thing I needed to do
was I needed to set the drop targets. Now, there was one thing about those drop targets, however, that was important. So a drop target would be relatively easy to set. Inside of jQuery UI, it's a simple setting the drop property with a function so that when you just use the droppable function to do that, that would be normally easy. You can see this here. However, one of the things that I wanted it to do is if you did not, if you really couldn't take that course, and I can show you by reloading this. So suppose I say that I've taken Mac 1105, and let's say I'm going to take Mac 1114 and Mac 2311 in that same semester. Well, I should not be able to take calculus the same semester I take pre-calculus. So if I drag that over there, notice it goes back. Okay, that is part of the business rules of the application. So to do that, I needed to say, hey, if the semester I'm dropping it in is not a valid semester to take that course, I want to animate the draggable object back to where it was located from, which I easily do right here with this if not drop semester, which is again business logic, the ID of it and the semester ID, and it sends it back over with an animation. That's it. Relatively straightforward. Then if I come down here and I'm going to actually have all this code is available for you to look at. It's in JS Fiddle. My JS Fiddle account is reglin, and the JS Fiddle ID of this is right here, H0L0ACYQ. It's beautiful cryptic names that it comes up with, these little hash names. Okay, you can take a look at this code. It should be relatively easy to follow. So then my logic pieces like drop semester. Drop semester is essentially saying, is it okay to take this course in this semester? Which I just use the function okay to take, and then I use the function if the prerequisites are met, and it returns a true or a false. And if it returns a false, it's not, you can't take it in that semester. You need to send it back over to where it came from, so you're not going to let the person actually drop it. Okay. Check prerequisites is again simple logic. I really did one thing here that would be a violation of what I normally always say you shouldn't do, was mix interface code with business logic code. I did here because I actually did set the CSS properties of the actual object to make it light green, because remember it changes from yellow to green. I just did that for pure simplicity's sake. This is such a small application. But I normally would not do that. However, really all I'm doing in this case is once I check the prerequisites, if the prerequisites are met, which is another business logic, I go ahead and I make it draggable. So now the real logic is in prerequisites met. This is kind of like an intermediate function. Okay to take is exactly what it says it is. Are you allowed to take that course? Which is again simple business logic based on the properties, the current state of the application, and the properties that you set in the JSON object. And then finally, I have a function that is a recursive function, okay, in here that says get all prerequisites. And this is why this is important. This is actually a good example of the use of a recursive function in a business application. Reason being is if you are wanting to take calculus, so the prerequisite for calculus might be trigonometry, okay? But the prerequisite for trigonometry is algebra. So you want to get all of the prerequisites, but you don't want to have to put all that into your data. Well, this function recursively says, look for the prerequisites that are listed for the course, and then add those to a list with the prerequisites, their prerequisites. So it gets you all prerequisites, which of course requires me to have, which comes out as an array. So I have to be able to merge the arrays. So I wrote my own little merge arrays function here. I have another function here, get ID from course name, because I sometimes have to go backwards. If I have the course name, I want to go back and get the ID. Remember, I'm associating everything with its ID. And then the big logic function, prerequisites met, which is basically, are the prerequisites met? So this is a really good example of the application of business logic in code, data in a JSON object, which is in this case a array of JSON objects. I could have done a JSON object which was not an array, but that's Again, simplicity being the paramount of when you're doing your design. And I'm hoping this gives you an example of an application that you can, that's very practical. Because if you think about how this application works, it's a very practical application. I can put my calculus in semester 2. Okay, couldn't do it in this semester here because, hey, I'm taking the prerequisites the same semester. Okay, thinking through principles, simple design, separation of data from business logic, and then if it's done all the way correctly, separation of interface from those business logic rules. Okay, which I did violate in a couple places, but you can see it's a good example of how to take different elements of building that entire stack of all the computing parts and putting it all together. Hopefully this was extremely useful to you as a programmer, and remember, the code is available for you to look at. Thank you very much. Good coding.